It was a day like any other. I was busy listening to the boring voice of the dispatcher, waiting for instructions on what to do next. I loved my job as a driver, but I hated quiet moments like this when I was forced to sit and wait. Being stuck in a car on a hot day was annoying, but it paid off, covering the cost of gas for unnecessary running of the van. My personality is such that I always have to move or do something. It had to be urgent because I was sitting with a bunch of regular customers downtown. I was a courier for Quicksilver Messenger Company and delivered small packages all over the city. Sitting has always been an easy way for me to become frustrated. This job taught me a lot of things that I never had the patience for. Finally, I received a rush order, which meant delivery within 1 hour, so I went to the address provided to pick it up. Having informed the dispatcher that the order was on board, I was told to go and deliver it first. I was stopped at a red light on a steep incline leading into downtown when a damn truck pulling a 28-foot trailer hit me from behind. His brakes failed. He pushed my back seat into the front seat, pushing me halfway across the intersection. The first rescuers had to cut me out using hydraulic shears. Using a board, they carefully tied me down and transported me to the hospital. After 3 X-rays and 1 MRI, they called a specialist, and by then I knew it was serious. The medical staff informed me that my wife was on her way. When she showed up after completing the paperwork, she was escorted to me. I saw genuine concern on her face. I tried to calm her down, saying that no matter what, I would recover and return to my previous form. The specialist told us that my neck was broken at such an angle that they were afraid it might have been cut completely. The bones C3, C4, and C5 at the top of my neck, which hold all my nerves and muscles, were broken at a 45-degree angle. I was placed in a special neck brace, but given the severity of my condition, they believed that I would no longer be able to walk. I was supposed to be completely paralyzed from the neck down. Once stabilized, I was moved to a nursing home near my home to begin the long road to recovery. My wife of 4 years was devastated, as was I. She heard and believed what the experts said, but I did not believe it. I hoped that I would be able to walk again. It was the only thing that kept me going. Doctors, mental health professionals, specialists, and my wife all tried to get me to accept my situation, but I couldn't. I knew I had to play the long game to prove them wrong. They all thought I was a stubborn ass for not taking their advice. I was the most stubborn person they had ever met. The more they thought they were right about my situation, the more I became convinced they were wrong. When they started talking about my life after recovery, I stopped listening. To this day, there are 2 things that I don't miss: staring at the floor or ceiling for 12 hours a day. My sanity was saved by radio shows and a roommate who had been with me for the last 6 months. Mr. Stevens was an old man who entertained me with stories of his life. The nurses hated the radio shows and his old stories. I loved them both and had deep respect for the man. He was battling cancer and knew he didn't have much time left. Since he was already scheduled for hospice care, we both knew it was just a matter of time for him. When I asked about my situation and what was going on, I was told that it would take time to figure out what was going on because I had to fully recover first. They touched my legs regularly to check how I felt. At first, I didn't feel anything, but then the sensitivity started to return. I found that I could wiggle my toes and stretch my feet. It was my roommate's secret. We both knew that if I showed it to them, they would chalk it up to something other than the sign I thought was important. At first, my wife came to me every day after work and stayed with me until 9 in the evening in a nursing home. But over time, this became less and less common. From her behavior, I realized that she did not see herself in the future with a disabled person and decided to start a new life. After 9 months of her obtuseness, I finally told her that I no longer needed her visits out of pity. I became convinced that she would wait until I was out of the hospital and out of the public eye to tell me she wanted a divorce. She was still young and wanted to enjoy life. The problem was that she couldn't be honest with herself. My best friend since childhood, who never really grew up, was my savior because his support was endless. When he wasn't playing in his band, He would always stop by to cheer me up. After a few months, since I knew him very well, I could understand from his behavior that there was something going on in his life that he was hiding from me. At the same time, when my wife stopped coming regularly, I noticed that he also behaved the same way. When friends and distant relatives visited me, I quickly realized that they were all doing the same thing. I knew that something had changed in my life outside the nursing home, and no one had the courage to tell me. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was going on. With my roommate, who I became close with, we discussed all the possible reasons for what could be happening. My wife, whom I had not seen for a month, came one day and said that she was going to Cuba for 2 weeks with her sister Susan, who lived 2 hours away from us. I accepted it without question. Almost 18 months have passed since the accident. I wondered why she decided to tell me this since she left me emotionally a long time ago. Doctors and specialists kept telling me to wait a few more weeks when I asked about my situation. I'm tired of their stupid answers and refusal to help me move forward. I lived with the reality that no one wanted to tell me the truth. I wouldn't have noticed it, but while my wife Linda was in Cuba, her sister Susan came by to say hello. She came to the city to spend time with her mother. I didn't ask her about Linda because I knew she didn't know anything, otherwise she wouldn't have come. To understand how I felt, you need to know that from our young years until today, my wife Linda, my best friend Simon, and I have been friends. Simon's father came to see me at this time and said that Simon had also gone to Cuba. Then I realized what everyone was trying to hide from me. Because of our history, the three of us knew what was going on. My best friend beat my wife. They are together now. It was a big secret that everyone tried to hide from me. Linda was a beautiful woman with blonde hair, a slim figure, and nice breasts. Her voice in the song could melt anyone's heart. Many men turned to look at her because she was so attractive. My best friend Simon always wanted her to be his lead singer and thought she would be a great frontwoman for his band. I didn't let this happen because I wanted to start building my life and studied at university by correspondence. I was in my senior year when my life changed. I now realize that Simon saw my injury as a chance to steal my wife by forcing her to join his group. I've always been skinny. My father said I could eat like a horse and not gain weight. At 5'10", I wasn't big, but I didn't consider myself small either. At the time of the accident, I weighed 150 pounds. However, my father knew that everything I ate turned into muscle strength, not physical development. Everyone who looks at me always underestimates my abilities. It was not uncommon for me to carry 2 boxes of printed paper up or down 14 floors on my shoulders. While they were together on their pre-wedding honeymoon, I began planning my revenge. I knew I would have to play the long game because everything about me was unknown. It had been a week since my wife returned from her women's holiday in Cuba when things started to happen. My good friend Simon came to see me with the darkest tan I've ever seen on him. Since it was daytime, my face was directed towards the floor. He sat down on the floor to talk to me so I could see him. He brought me a box of Cuban cigars, wrapped in the original packaging, and a box of matches. We talked for about an hour about what he did while he was there. He said I could start smoking cigars as soon as I got out of this bed. I didn't ask him who he was traveling with because I knew. He didn't even ask me if I had my wife. If he weren't with her, he would have asked. Before he left, I persuaded him to loosen the strap holding my right side in place so I could scratch myself. He had to crawl under me to do it. Luckily, he forgot to tell the nurses he did it. Now, all I had to do was wait for my bed to be raised upright, and I prayed that when they turned it, they wouldn't notice the loose belt. My neighbor said after he left that it was nice of him to bring me Cuban cigars. I said, yes, it was. I explained that Simon and I grew up together and were what I called lifelong friends. It looks like this relationship is coming to an end, my neighbor said. As soon as I get out of this bed and stand on my feet, that will be it, I said. My wife was his mistress for over 6 months, I believe. How did you understand it? He asked. Have you heard rumors from the nursing staff talking in the hallway? No, I accidentally found out that both left for Cuba at the same time, I said. Knowing the history of the three of us, it was easy to understand. After changing duty at 7 in the evening, I began to act. Now I was looking at the ceiling. I started to work slowly. With my right arm weakened enough to move, I quickly freed it. I then untied the belt on the right side, then moved on to untying the left side of my upper body. With my upper body free, I slowly pulled myself up using the handrails to a sitting position. My neighbor quietly encouraged me. To this day, I remember how he raised his clenched fist in support and held it. I knew it took a lot of effort for him. The weight of the neck brace felt a little heavy, but did not dominate my body due to my normal upper body strength. My neighbor rode up to me in his wheelchair and lowered the side rail. I freed my legs and slowly moved them towards the floor. I shifted on the bed until I could reach the dresser. Opening the drawer with his help, I found a pair of jeans and a denim shirt, which I had difficulty putting on. I was still barefoot. My only goal was to go outside and smoke a cigar. I unwrapped the box of cigars and put 2 of them and a box of matches in my shirt pocket. My roommate, who was an older gentleman, had a walker, and I asked if I could borrow it. He didn't say anything. With a huge smile, he simply wheeled them towards me, using his wheelchair to help himself. Elevators to the right, he said. First aid station to the left. Let me distract the nurses for a few minutes. Just leave me a couple of matches and one of your cigars. Okay. I smiled and said, take not 1, but 3 or 4 from the box. Just know that I'm heading for the exit. I waited about 5 minutes to get down on the floor. My first movements were slow, but I was able to reach the elevator and get into it without being noticed. I couldn't have done it without my neighbor's walker. My balance was unstable, my legs were stiff and unwilling to move. But I persisted. A few minutes later, I was standing against the side of the building barefoot with a walker in front of me, smoking my first cigar in a year. I admit I enjoyed it. That Cuban cigar never tasted better to me. When the nurses returned my roommate to our room, panic began. I guess their weak brains couldn't understand what I did. I think their worst fear was what would happen to them because they would lose a patient who was bedridden. I enjoyed the fresh air, the evening time, and the cigar in complete satisfaction. I felt free. I was proud because the fact that I was standing proved that what I had believed all along was right. I was right and they were wrong. All that was required was to believe in yourself and wait for the body to recover on its own. I didn't realize until now how much this experience changed me. I watched with a smile on my face as a police car pulled up with its siren and red lights flashing while I relaxed and smoked my cigar. The policeman came out and approached me, shaking his head. I didn't even button my shirt, enjoying the cool evening air on my chest. You made all the nurses panic. Looks like you're not as sick as they said. You know, I have to get you back, he said. So throw away the cigar and let's go. Using the brick wall as support, I lifted the walker towards him and said, not until I smoke these 2 cigars. Seeing how strong I looked, he realized and retreated. I think he was trying to figure out how to handle the situation without hurting me. A few minutes later, the local specialist in charge of my case and my family doctor came to us. All 3 of them took turns trying unsuccessfully to convince me to put out my cigar and return to my room. I just told them straight out where to go and how to do it. I went out to smoke and had no intention of moving. To be honest, I had heard enough of their bullshit advice and didn't give it any more weight. They suggested contacting my wife. Perhaps she could persuade me. Dr. Fatismadel was shaking his head as if trying to figure out how to get me to cooperate. But the doctor smiled. This spoke volumes to me. Before the policeman could say anything into the radio transmitter, I said, better have the dispatcher call Peter McLaughlin at and ask where his son Simon is playing now. He asked me, why? I replied, because my wife was his mistress for more than a few months. If I know Simon, he keeps her close, so she's probably with him. This was the first time I saw 3 faces turn white at the same time. It made me wonder if they all knew or were starting to realize what a problem I was becoming. My statement made them admit that my wife would not be useful to them. They were at a dead end trying to figure out what to do with me. They were afraid to do anything physically because of my condition. For the first time, I was in complete control of the situation and had no intention of letting go. Dr. Maddle, could you call my father and tell him to come get me? Let him know that I want to go home, I said. My family doctor and my father were good friends. He replied, Damn, Donald, I'll call him just so he can knock some sense into your fat head. I grabbed my walker and began to slowly walk toward the sidewalk, knowing that my father lived only 8 blocks away. The policeman stood in front of me to block my path. I knew that my action would force the doctor to do something. Now he understood how determined I was. Dr. Maddle said, Donald, stop. I promise I will let you go. You are strong enough, but you are weak. Today, you have already achieved a lot on your own. I just don't want you to overexert yourself. We are still coming to terms with the fact that you stand and walk. The doctor called my father, telling him that he urgently needed to come to the nursing home. The specialist was about to say something. Peter, don't you dare say a word. In your opinion, he shouldn't have walked. It's his stubbornness and persistence that drives him, Dr. Meadows said. Let it be. If he weren't so clever, you might have been right. Donald is just evil enough to do this out of spite. The question is, how the hell was he able to get out of bed on his own? It turned out that Simon wasn't playing at some low-end bar that night, because when my dad showed up, Linda, my wife in name only now, pulled up in our second car. For her, what she saw could not be reality because the complete shock was visible on her face. It was a moment of pride and joy for my father as his eldest son stood tall and proud. For him, it was something that he was led to believe would never happen again. I told him, as Grandpa said, tough times don't last, but strong people do. I might need your help getting into the passenger seat of your truck. Without saying a word, my father smiled and watched as I took a drag from my cigarette. I think he was giving himself time to accept what was real and what wasn't. He came up to me and said, Take your time, son. I'm going to call your mom to get the downstairs bedroom ready. This is your room for as long as you need it. Are you sure you want to leave the hospital? I looked at him and my father smiled. Gentlemen, I know this look. It will leave no choice to anyone. He will leave with or without my help. If he falls, he will simply get up and try again. He's so determined. Linda came up in shock, not knowing what to say, and I just looked at her like she was dead. The policeman stopped her and said, I hate to tell you that your husband knows about your relationship with Simon McLaughlin. It was he who asked us to contact his father to find out where we are. It's best for you to leave for now. Linda looked at me as I said, Dad, it looks like one of the Walking Dead has showed up. What else has Simon done besides sleeping with my wife? Lives in your house, drives your second car, and uses your name to get a loan before I get lawyers, he replied. With Linda's consent, he used your name. I started pushing the walker, slowly moving towards the passenger side of his truck. I stopped and turned to Linda with a straight face and said, Tell Simon what you just saw and thank him personally for it. When I'm fully recovered, I'll come get you, Obama. The look of horror on Linda's face made it clear that she understood the message loud and clear. She knew Simon's only chance was to escape. She knew me well enough to know that if I said something, I would do it. I said, Linda, tell Simon his days in music are over. He took what I valued with his own hands. So when I'm ready, I'll take it. The policeman caught her. Simon's hands were what he did for a living, whatever that was. My father walked slowly next to me as I walked barefoot to the passenger side of the truck. When my father helped me climb in, I closed the door. I rolled down the window and asked the doctor to return the walker to my roommate. Please inform Mr. Stevens what's going on and let him know I'll be back in a few days, I said. Dr. Maddle said he would do it. After parking the truck at home, my dad came over and helped me down. He stayed close to me to catch me if I fell. Mom, hearing voices, opened the front door to meet us. We both watched as she covered her mouth and screamed with joy. Luckily, they built a wheelchair ramp in case it was needed. I used the side rails to help me climb up to the front door. My legs screamed for mercy, but I moved forward. Dr. Madel was right. I had overexerted myself. I had gotten to this point and knew I could go a few more steps. As we approached the kitchen table, there was a knock on the door. My father went to open it. I pulled out a chair and sat down, completely exhausted. It was the Dr. Madel who wanted to examine me. After the examination, he lectured me, but did it with a wide smile. I'll admit, I deserved it, but damn, I'd do it again. Handing his keys to my father, Dr. Madel said, "In my trunk are 2 canes that I bought for Don to use for a few days. Bring them while I remove the front of the machine and the chin rest. I think Don has proven to us that he doesn't need them. The rest will remain until I see another set of X-rays." With the apparatus partially removed, I took 2 canes and stood up. It was decided that they needed to be adjusted to my height. I asked my dad to borrow his shaving supplies. After receiving them, he placed them in the bathroom on the first floor. I stood up, using 1 cane for support, and went to shave. When I came out, I started to look like my old self. Now I need a decent haircut. Mom asked if I wanted anything. I asked her for a cigarette, 2 cheese sandwiches, and a beer. She started preparing 4 for me. I needed to go back to the hospital for X-rays and pick up the rest of my belongings from the nursing home. Once the device is removed, I will be sent to rehabilitation for 2 weeks, depending on my progress. "I'm proud of you, Donald," Dr. Meadows said. "You never believed us and didn't give up when others could. Remember that you must continue to see the specialist until he says that you no longer need it. Otherwise, it could greatly harm the insurance payment that you are entitled to." Dad walked Dr. Meadows to his car, and they talked for a few minutes. Mom watched me eat my sandwiches, trying not to get too emotional. It felt good to eat real food again. When Dad returned, he took out some good scotch and poured us all a glass. When he sat down at the table, we started talking. Since I was in hospital, Simon persuaded Linda to start singing in his band. She liked it. Thanks to her, the group began to gain popularity and receive more lucrative contracts. It became serious when her visits to me began to decrease. He moved into my house 6 months after the accident. They built a wheelchair ramp, expecting the worst, preparing for a future where they might bring me home since I no longer had a home of my own. "Dad, I need my textbooks, computer, and personal belongings as soon as possible. I will contact the university and see if I can start studying again," I said. "I will need to go to the bank to check what is left in the accounts if my name is still on them." "That's enough, Donald. You need to explain everything that happened today," my mother said. So I told her about the cigars and everything that happened after that. She laughed and said, "Well, of course, you are just like your grandfather. When I tell him, he'll say something like, 'Give this man a trophy.' Your dad is going to take the day off from work and go pick up all your stuff from your house," my mom said. "But first I'll go to Walmart and buy you some clothes." My dad walked Mom out and then poured us another glass, then said, "The cop heard what you said to Linda. You will be watched, so be careful." "Dad, Linda and Simon will be living in fear for the near future. This must harm their relationship. I wouldn't be surprised if they start blaming each other for the current situation. And then when they start going back to their routine, I'll file for divorce," I said. "I'm going to make it dirty and violent. Since the car they are driving is in my name, I will pick it up when they are on their way, leaving them without transportation." "You're playing a long game with their lives," my dad said. "What about the threat to Simon about his hands?" "He can handle it himself with a little help," I said. "Simon is basically an immature adult who is always chasing the next shiny thing, and if it comes with a skirt, so much the better. I have a couple of friends whose husbands will make sure Simon hurts himself as soon as I introduce him to their wives." "Are you sure about this?" asked my dad. I looked at him and said, "I'm walking, aren't I? If something changes, then my actions will change. Rest assured, this is not if, but when." It was difficult to get up the next morning, but I managed. I had to roll out of bed onto the floor and then get up. It was difficult, but I did it. The more I worked on my legs and arms, the more they returned to normal. I had to be back at the hospital by 10 in the morning for an X-ray. While I was doing this, my dad was taking my things. Thank God my mom bought me a pair of shoes without laces. I wouldn't be able to tie them. Using my cane, I made my way to the kitchen table. We barely made it to my X-ray because I was moving slowly. As soon as it was ready, the head of the department checked the images and called a specialist. As soon as he saw the X-rays, he gave permission to remove the device from my head. As soon as it was removed, I felt that my movements became easier. I then walked into Dr. Maddle's office where my mother was waiting for me. I was told that I would begin rehabilitation in 2 weeks. We went to the bank to check my bank account. I received an allowance of $2,000 a month towards my insurance claim advance, which was deposited into my account via direct deposit. Nothing left. I called the lawyer who sent me the routing number. The bank, using this number, discovered that all funds had been redirected and deposited into another account at another bank. The owner of this account is my wife's lover, Simon. It took half an hour to find the authorization form to redirect the funds. My signature was forged. The date it was signed on, I could prove I was in the hospital. By the time I left the bank branch, I had a new account, all funds had been returned, and a new debit card. I used it to withdraw $200. I finally got my hair cut. The bank called the police to begin an investigation. The strength in my legs was slowly returning, but I was getting tired quickly. Mom took me home so I could rest. Dad was able to take my things. Everything was packed for him. All my clothes, books, personal items, and computer equipment. They installed a computer in his office and moved the television into the family room. After speaking with the admissions office and finding out what happened, they agreed to let me start the year over without any additional fees. I was sitting on the back patio enjoying the day when the whole family arrived. My 2 older sisters and younger brother had to see it to believe it. Everyone felt guilty for not believing in me or not wanting to visit me more often than they did. I forgave them, but I knew our relationship had changed. It gave me the opportunity to catch up on what I had missed in their lives. We chatted for about an hour before my mom stopped us because I needed a rest. One afternoon, I asked my mother to take me to the nursing home because I wanted to see my old neighbor. When she dropped me off, I promised to call her when I was ready to come home. I entered his room and found him in a wheelchair. "Old friend," I said, "I think we should go out and smoke a couple of cigarettes, if that's okay." The nurse came into the room as I was rolling him out. I tied the laces to my 2 canes and slung them over my shoulder. "Where are you taking Mr. Stevens?" she asked. "Get some fresh air, chat, and smoke," I said. "Don't worry, I'll get it back." "He said you'll be back." "We didn't believe him," she said. "The stronger I get, the more often I'll come," I said. I wouldn't be standing without his help. We went outside and smoked a couple of cigars. I brought him back because he was tired. We chatted for another hour before he fell asleep. It took me a week to feel half normal. Every day I used the cane less and less. I hired a feminist lawyer who was furious at what my wife and her lover had done. On Friday, my wife received her divorce notice and a police detective came to see me. I explained what I knew about Simon McLaughlin. My father gave him copies of documents he had made to counter everything Simon did, claiming to have power of attorney to act on my behalf. My father and I learned that he would be charged with identity theft, bank fraud, and extortion. If convicted, it would mean between 5 and 7 years. That night, I went to see Mr. Delane Stevens again, learning that he was rapidly deteriorating. I was glad I came because he died while I was there. Cancer finally defeated him, but he fought until the very end. To this day, I think he only lived to see me get back on my feet. I arrived on the first day of rehab right on time. The female physiotherapist assigned to the rehabilitation center was Simon's younger sister, Colin. I have to admit that if she weren't my ex-friend's sister, I would have been interested in her. My first reaction was to run away. Luckily, none of us mentioned it. Colleen was a very passionate and persistent woman who did not tolerate nonsense. We were both cautious as we studied with each other. She spent the day testing all my capabilities. We spent the first day stretching my muscles. I have to admit, she was surprised at how much I could do, and I was surprised too. I was amazed at how much balance I regained in 3 weeks. Colleen was pleasantly surprised when she suggested I try something new because I asked why. When I understood her thoughts, I made adjustments if I could. By the end of the day, I was exhausted. "Do you think," Colleen asked, "that you're ready to start lifting weights?" "Power has never been a problem for me," I explained. "It was the immobility of the body that incapacitated me." "Can you prove it without hurting yourself?" Colleen asked. I turned to her with a smile. As soon as I placed my hands on her hips, I lifted her up. Colleen laughed and then leaned her head towards mine and kissed me, and I kissed her back. Colleen had her mother's features. She had an hourglass figure, blue eyes that sparkled, a warm and genuine smile, a genuine interest in others, and a kind heart. She was determined, like all women of Scottish descent. At 5'7", she was the perfect height for a man like me at 5'10". "You've proven your point, Donald Earl Jameson. Now put me in my place," Colin said. "When everyone heard about your accident, they thought you were finished. My father said, don't be surprised when he gets up, because everyone underestimated him." "It looks like your father was right," I said, putting her in her place. "It's a shame another member of your family didn't think so." "Now that the truth is coming out," Colin said, "our family feels Simon has deceived us all. We had to wonder if he could do this to his best friend, what could he do to us? We haven't seen him much for the last 2 years. Now we understand why." "Simon and Linda's day will come," I said. "They know it, but they don't know when. I'm not the only one following them. Linda received notice of divorce last Friday on grounds of adultery. Simon, because of what I discovered after I left the hospital, is under investigation. If convicted, he will serve 7 to 10 years. I watched you and my brother on the football fields. It amazed me that even though you were the best player, you were never greedy and you were always a team player," Colleen said. "I'm used to comparing potential suitors to you. So, when is my first date?" "If I were fully recovered, I would say tonight," I said honestly. "We both know you spared me today, and I'm still tired." Colleen looked at me as if she was discovering something new about me. "What kept you so positive for so long that you would walk again?" "Everything I did in faith," I explained. "I learned that if you don't believe in yourself, no one else will. Everything that those I loved did, they did because they didn't believe." Colleen took my hand and led me to a bench to sit down. My mother's grandfather was a proud man who spent most of his adult life alone. He also went through a situation that changed a lot, Colin explained. He and my great-grandmother raised 8 children, but he was no longer close to the rest of the family. He took a high moral stand. I never held a grudge against their behavior, but for his family, the previous closeness was lost forever. "I see where he was then," I said. "Sometimes things are done to protect a person when in fact they do no good by hiding the truth." He could see their deception as avoidance or rejection of the truth. This caused him to lose the ability to blindly believe or trust them again. "What else has my brother done that our family might not know?" Colleen asked. "He forged my signature to redirect a money order that was supposed to be used for my upkeep. It was sent by the insurance company responsible for my accident," I explained. "He transferred it to another bank into his account." Colleen's face turned pale. Then the tears came. I hugged her and pressed her to me. "The bank refunded the funds to me because we were able to prove that I could not sign the forms because I was bedridden," I said. "When the detective came to me, my dad showed and handed over all the legal paperwork he had done to counter everything your brother did, claiming to have power of attorney to act on my behalf. The copy of the power of attorney that the bank had was also a fake, as it was dated and certified after I was bedridden. We talked for a few more minutes while waiting for my car. I explained that I couldn't come on Wednesday because I wanted to go to the funeral. Mom noticed that I was in a better mood, so at dinner I had to explain to her how my day went. After that, I took up university courses with a vengeance. On Tuesday, when the lunch break was announced, I went out to sit at a picnic table, drink coffee from the machine, and smoke. Colleen joined me later with 2 bags she had brought for lunch. Over dinner, I told her about the friendship I had formed with Mr. Stevens. I said that we supported each other in difficult times. I was shocked that there was no one at the funeral except me and my mother. The Salvation Army captain did a good job conducting the service. According to his will, his body was cremated. After the service, I asked the funeral director what would happen to his ashes, and he said they had been turned over to his lawyer. As he understood, everything was done according to his will. We were about to get into the car after loading floral arrangements from the funeral into the car when a man approached us. It turned out it was Mr. Stevens' lawyer. We followed him to his office. Mr. Stevens lost his family many years ago and never remarried. As a result, he changed his will, leaving everything to me. His only wish is for you to take his ashes to the highest mountain in the area and scatter them to the wind, his lawyer said. Then he told me in detail what was bequeathed to me. Both my mother and I were surprised at how wealthy he was. As we drove home, I told my mom that we couldn't tell anyone about this until the divorce was finalized. We both realized that the inheritance provided me for life. Colleen worked with me every day for 2 weeks, writing down all the details of what I could and couldn't do. When I asked her why, she said she wanted everyone to know how much I had recovered from everything I had been through. Even though we hadn't started dating yet, we were completely honest with each other. Everyone around us saw a serious attraction growing between us. I received a lot of teasing during rehab because I was the only one who had lunch cooked every day. Colleen drove me to Mr. Stevens' lawyer's office immediately after telling me that my rehabilitation was complete. When I was called, I asked her to come with me. I asked him if he would like to continue to be my lawyer in the future. He agreed, and I asked him to assemble a team of advisors for me. He gave me Mr. Stevens' ashes. "Where are you going to scatter his ashes?" he asked. "On the top of the mountain above, where his house used to be, because it looks out over the mighty Mississippi River," I said. "Even if I have to buy a new SUV to get there." "It's a beautiful house with waterfalls on 125 acres, he replied, handing me the keys. "You'll need an SUV to get to some parts of the site. I suggest that you withdraw the property from the corporate trust that was created in Canada as part of your retained income as soon as possible. Create a board of directors and have them review everything before moving forward. What has been done in recent years is to manage his corporation rather than develop it." With that, he handed me an envelope containing a check for over $3 million and said, "That was all the cash in his personal accounts and bonds after I made and paid his last tax refund for the current year. The inheritance tax has already been paid and everything has officially passed into your name." Colleen drove me to the bank, which was open until 9 o'clock in the evening, so I could deposit money into my account. When I walked out, I said, "How about dinner at Red Lobster?" Over dinner, we discussed my new house and what I was going to do with it. I said I don't know until I see him. I asked her if she was free tomorrow after 10 because I would like her to come with me to look at the house. She agreed, but asked why it was so late. I said I needed to buy a Jeep Cherokee and insure it now that she let me drive. After dinner, we went to a car dealership. After asking for a cash discount, we agreed on a deal subject to a commercial inspection on the new silver Cherokee. The salesperson was shocked to see me use my debit card to pay in full. As we left the dealership, Colleen asked if I had used all my funds to pay. I said, "No." "Why did you ask for a commercial inspection?" Colleen asked. "It's a new car. Anything made on an assembly line from parts produced all over the world is a lottery," I said. "My dad, who owns his own workshop, always did this. It saved him from a lot of problems in the future. Colleen drove me home. She walked with me to the threshold and kissed me goodbye. As soon as I entered, my mother stunned me with the news. My second car was repossessed about an hour ago in St. Louis, while Linda and Simon were getting ready to go on stage, thanks to a restraining order my lawyer obtained. Mom asked me about Colleen, and I honestly explained how I felt and why. I went to bed with a smile on my face. My dad took me to pick up the car at 9 in the morning, and it passed the inspection with flying colors. The first thing I did was get insurance and get the numbers. At 10 minutes past 10, I arrived at Peter McLaughlin's house. Walking to the door to call Colleen, Peter opened the door. "Come on in, Dawn. Colin is a little late," Peter said. "Thank you for not holding it against us for what Simon did." "He made his own bed. Let him lie in it," I answered. "The worst is yet to come for him." "Colleen told us you said we wouldn't pay bail for him," he said. "It's good to see you again, son. You will always be a welcome guest here." To me, that said a lot about how his whole family felt about it. Her mother was in the kitchen and began preparing buns and tea. Of course, I couldn't hurt her by refusing, so I spent the next hour talking to Colleen's parents by my side. Her little sister caught me in the bathroom at the end of the hall and whispered to me, "Mom and Dad think you and Colleen will get married within the year. Colleen, although she won't admit it, has been in love with you for many years." She made me wonder if I was interested in Colleen because of my desire for revenge. I guess my little sister was wiser than I thought. She said, "Don't go there, Donnie. You've never been one to take revenge on those who don't deserve it. As for Simon, we all feel he has brought shame to the family and want nothing to do with him." I smiled and nodded and said, "Thank you for reminding me of the kind of person I am because I had my doubts." "You're welcome," she said with a smile. "Colleen came home after finding out that you were assigned to her as a client because she was afraid of how you would treat our family. Then all evening after the first class, she talked to me about your first kiss after the first day. If you're not ready for a new relationship with her, end it now before you hurt yourself and her." "Tonight you will get your answers," I replied. Finally, we got out and headed to my new home. It took us quite a long time to get there. As I approached the fenced area, I got out and opened the gate. As soon as we drove up the long paved road, we saw what the site looked like. Mother Nature had taken its toll and everything needed cleaning up. But when we both saw the house, Colleen and I were speechless. The log house and accompanying building were stunning and large. Since everything was still corporately owned, all utilities worked. Opening the front door, we stepped into a dream. Colleen took my hand and said, "This is amazing. Can you believe it?" "He built this the year before his wife and children died in a car accident," I explained. "That's why it's not furnished, but it's maintained. He lived in the city, but came here to support it. With his dreams of him and his family shattered, living there would be too painful for him." We toured the first floor before heading up to the second. The master bedroom was huge. The other 3 bedrooms were also larger than you usually see in new homes. There were a few things that needed to be updated, but overall everything was fine. "When did you find out about your inheritance?" Colleen asked worriedly. "After Linda received notice, it can't be considered community property, although I'm sure she'll try," I said. "This house will become my home." "Would you like me to make a list of the things you will need?" Colleen asked, "while you're looking at the store." After I agreed, Colleen took out her laptop and got to work. I found the keys to the huge side building. I went out and found a huge garage-type building with barn doors at the back. Inside was equipment for maintaining the area. It took me half an hour to connect the tractor to the large hedge trimmer standing on the side. I drove along one side of the long road, cutting as much as possible, then returned along the other side. At that moment, I thanked my grandfather for all the time I spent with him on the farm as a child. As I pulled up to the house on my way back, Colleen waved for me to stop. She found a safe in the back of one of the 2 closets in the master bedroom, hidden behind a false wall. It was still locked. I went through the bunch of keys and found one that fit. I turned the key and the safe door opened. Inside were three 3-pound gold bars and an envelope. I valued the gold at about $150,000. Inside the envelope were bearer bonds of $50,000 each, and there were 30 of them. I knew Colleen had a lot of thoughts running through her head, so I said, "It's a good thing we've been dating since I started rehab. Otherwise, I might think you're after my new money." She jumped into my arms. Let me tell you, it took a long time before we stopped kissing. I got back to work clearing away the undergrowth before it started to get dark. After I put everything away and locked it, we headed out to dinner. "You have a lot to do if you want to make this your home," Colleen said. "Have you decided where to start?" "Well, the first thing we'll do after we eat," I said. "This will let your parents know that we are dating." Colin said, "If this car had a regular seat, I would be next to you right now." She called her parents and asked if they had started dinner. When they said no, we suggested meeting at Yummy's, a Chinese buffet restaurant. They agreed and were waiting for us when we arrived. As soon as we sat down, we all ordered hot tea and went for our first helping of food. Colin's mum Mary told her, "It's good that this is happening. You look so happy." Colin replied, "Nothing special. We were just talking and Donald said it was a good thing we were dating before he got his inheritance." "Congratulations. Now all you need is time," Mary replied without hesitation. By the time she caught up with her daughter, she was next to me. I loaded my plate with fried shrimp, sweet and sour pork, and mussels. Colleen typed something more traditional. We returned to our table before her parents and sister Katie. It was Katie who asked in front of the family, "Are you dating?" "We've been dating since I started rehab," I said. Today, we finally admitted it. Katie smiled widely. "What's that big smile?" Colleen asked her. "Oh, nothing. I just remembered the promise you made to me earlier and fulfilled," Katie replied. Peter didn't say a word. He just stood up, walked to the bar out front, and bought 4 beers. When he returned, he handed us all a bottle. This surprised us all. We chatted about small things until Peter and I returned with a second helping of food. "When are you going to get your work permit?" asked Peter. "Or don't you know yet?" "I just finished rehab and am seeing my family doctor and specialist next week," I explained. "Until then, I can't say more than 3 months into my final year of training to become a forensic accountant." "When you're ready to work, come apply to my firm," Mary said. "Partners are always looking for good talent, and we need someone with your skills." "I'll take that under advisement, but I have a lot to do in the next few weeks," I said. "I need to arrange a place for me to live with Colleen's help." "Were you looking for a place with my sister?" asked Katie. "Not really. It's the house he inherited," Colleen said. "He is beautiful. Look at the photos in the gallery. I took a lot of pictures for comparison when we furnished it." "We?" asked Peter. "Yes, we are, Dad," Colleen replied. "Donald asked me to help him choose furniture for his home and all the necessary things." "I would prefer a woman's help," I said, "because I know that they know how to make a home cozy and not just a place to live." Colleen looked at me and smiled, then leaned over and kissed me seriously. When Colleen's family looked at the photos, I explained how I had inherited the property from my neighbor and the house was part of that. "Since it has been empty for a long time, I plan to do an inspection first," I said. "This way I can fix everything before I move." "Have your parents seen him?" asked Mary. "No, today was the first time we saw him," I replied. "I have a lot of work to do to clear the site before anyone can see it. Only the area around the house and garage was maintained in order." "There's a video of Dawn riding a tractor, starting to mow the brush," Colleen said. "It will give you an idea of how neglected everything is." After dinner, we went to look at household appliances. We visited all the major stores and compared prices. Colleen and I decided it was better to go with a local supplier, even if it cost more due to warranty and service. It was about 10 o'clock in the evening when I returned home. I was woken up on Sunday morning by an early call on my cell phone. I missed 2 calls and 3 text messages, all from my soon-to-be ex-sister Susan. I called her back. It turned out she brought her sister and Simon from St. Louis because they didn't have a car. She wanted to meet me before returning home. I agreed to meet for breakfast at the Hickory House in Jackson. She was waiting for me just outside the entrance, so when I walked in, she stood up, and we asked the hostess to show us to our table. "You look good, Donald," Susan said. "Thank you for meeting me here. I heard my sister's version, now I want to hear yours." "You know, she left the marriage mentally," I said. "When I was bedridden, she, I understood, leaned on Simon for support. He slowly gained her trust and entered her life, as well as my bank account. Linda told me that you told her you didn't want her visits out of pity and basically abandoned her," Susan said, "before she got into a relationship with Simon. After I was moved to a nursing home, Linda came every day for the first month, and by the 6th month, it was once a week," I said. "During this time, Simon's visits followed the same pattern. By the end of the 9th month, I was happy to see them both at least once a month." Susan's face turned pale, and she replied, "I didn't know that." "The next time Linda came, she didn't feel comfortable with me," I said. Then I told her that I didn't need her visits out of pity. Since I started getting back on my feet, I found out that Simon moved into our house 6 months after the accident. "Damn, she lied to me about everything," Susan said. "She told me you were just being an asshole about the divorce." "Sorry for the bad news, Susan," I said. "Simon forged my signature on the form, redirects to steal the advance I was receiving from the insurance company. My father had to sue him to stop him from using my name to get a loan. This was easily proven, since the form could only be signed at the department, and at the date of signing, I was in a nursing home." "Linda knows about this?" asked Susan. "I doubt it," I said. "Simon could have obtained information from postal bank statements. All this is being investigated by the local police. If he is found guilty, he could get 7 years. "Now I understand why you filed for divorce," Susan said. "Not only were you emotionally abandoned, but you were also cheated on. I'm going to talk to my mom and tell her what she didn't know." "Susan, the last time you came to me," I said, "I was completely surprised because according to your sister, you were supposed to be in the cube with her. In fact, she went with Simon." "What is she doing to herself?" asked Susan. "Ever since, Linda's personality seems to have changed as we knew her," I said. "I need to ask if Simon got her hooked on illegal substances. I know he sometimes sold them to support himself." We ate breakfast and talked about everyday things before going our separate ways. I said I'll pay the bill. "Donald, I'm going to talk to Mom," she said. "If she needs to hear your side of the story in person, can she call you?" "Yes," I replied. After saying goodbye to Susan, I called the detective who spoke with me to explain that my car had been repossessed and where it was located. I told him that I was worried that Simon was still selling illegal substances to support his habit, and that he often sold them during breaks between shows. He said he would get a warrant to search the car today. If they found any measurable quantities of illegal substances, he wanted me to transfer the car to Linda through my lawyer, giving her title. I agreed. Colin and I took a tape measure and went back to the log house to measure the space left for the refrigerator and stove to make sure they were the right size. We also inspected the laundry room to make sure there was enough space for a full-size washer and dryer. We checked the pantry as I wanted a freezer. From there, we moved back to Jackson and made the local dealers happy. Before we left, we agreed on delivery for the following Saturday. I called my parents and arranged to meet them for an early dinner at Red Lobster. I was driving when my cell phone rang, so Colleen answered it and put it on speaker. It was a detective story confirming what I suspected was true. Colleen's face said it all. I told him I would call my lawyer first thing in the morning and arrange for the title of the car to be transferred. If my dad finds out, he will kill himself. Dad lost his little brother to this many years ago. "We won't say anything," I said. The detective didn't say what exactly he found. We don't even know for sure whether the cooking equipment belonged to Simon. That's why I'm transferring ownership of the car to my ex-wife. It will take time for the detective to figure out what's what. My parents were surprised but pleased to see Colleen with me. At dinner, Colleen showed my parents pictures of the house. "Is this part of the corporation you inherited?" asked my mother. "Yes, but it was in the form of a trust that was put in my name," I said. "It was incorporated so it pays a lot less taxes. I have a lot of work to do before the house is livable. I'll start with an inspection." "I think you both should know," Colleen told my parents. "My brother is in much more trouble than you think. If what we learned today is true, my parents will cut him out of their lives." "Besides," I added, "Susan, Linda's sister, and I talked this morning. She wanted to hear my side of events. No one in her family seemed to know what happened." "So what about you two?" asked my mother. "We're just dating now," Colin said. "It will have to be this way until Donald sorts out all his problems." My lawyer feminist listened to what was happening with the car she repossessed and decided she could use it to her advantage. She called Linda and offered her the car in exchange for some concessions. Linda waived all rights to any insurance claim. I signed the papers to transfer the car and my rights to the house, but she had to remortgage it in her name. Linda thought she was winning, so she came to sign the documents right away. After paying the fine, Simon took her to work. I agreed to meet with the building inspector at 1 p.m. By the time I got home, the detective had called and said Simon had taken the car, and they arrested him after following him to an empty warehouse suspected of being used for manufacturing. He was taken along with 8 others. Now the building will have to be demolished. The inspector found the house and large garage in good condition. He suggested replacing all the switches with commercial ones with dimmers and upgrading the lighting because LED lighting in this house would save over $100 a month in energy costs. The furnace was in excellent condition, as was the air conditioner. After a visit with Dr. Maddle, who gave me permission to return to normal life, I waited for Colleen after work. When I walked in a few minutes before closing, she threw herself into my arms, crying. She was informed. Linda called her father and told him. It was a sad and sober evening at her parents' place. Early Tuesday morning, I was at the Quicksilver Messenger office. Everyone was happy to see me. I was offered to return to work, but I refused. I received my last check and went downstairs to say goodbye to my colleagues. Richard was just loading the car for the morning flight. We went out to his van to talk. I wanted to make sure his brother was still in charge of assigning prisoners to cells. He confirmed. I handed Stephen the envelope containing the bearer bond. Richard opened the envelope and looked at the bearer bond before saying, "My brother knows several people who are in prison for various stupid things. What you need can be done without money because he is owed several favors." "I'll give the money to his wife and son," Richard said. "They came at the right time so they wouldn't have to file for bankruptcy." I drove back to the Cape with a smile on my face, knowing I had kept my word. Simon's days in music were over. One is ready, one remains. Now I had to figure out what to do with Linda. Anything I was going to do had to wait until the divorce. When I got home, I contacted the electrician and arranged for him to come on Thursday. When Colleen got off work, I was waiting for her. We spent the evening shopping for lighting equipment for every room in the house. All fluorescent lamps will be replaced in the bathrooms and kitchen. After seeing the specialist, he said he wanted to see me one more time before allowing me to return to work and scheduled an appointment in a month. On Wednesday evening, I informed Colleen that the terms of my divorce had been agreed upon as we began looking at furniture for the home. "Your next wife will probably want to have a say in what will you have in the house," Colleen said. "Perhaps we should focus only on what you really need, like the master bedroom and kitchen." "No," I said. "We will furnish the entire house, including all the curtains, so it is ready for her to move in." "You mean you've already decided who you're going to marry?" Colleen asked. "Does she know about this?" "Let me be clearer, Miss Know-It-All," I said with a smile. "So there is no doubt. I can't ask you to marry me until I'm divorced. We attracted a lot of unwanted attention because Colleen became emotional. We started with large furniture. I could see by how quickly she made her choice that she hoped so. We agreed on delivery and installation for Saturday. It was around midnight when I dropped her off at home. When the electrician arrived, I walked him through the entire house, showing him what needed to be removed and what to install. I was lucky that he was able to finish everything in one long day. I spent the day clearing out the undergrowth on Friday. That evening, Colin and I visited another furniture store to buy more furniture. On Saturday, I was cleaning. I removed all boxes and packaging immediately after unpacking them. I let Colleen dictate where and how she wanted things placed. Between 3 different deliveries, she was overwhelmed. By 6 in the evening, the house began to resemble a cozy home. The problem was that we were both exhausted. Sitting in our half-furnished living room, discussing our progress, we fell asleep. We woke up at 7 in the morning. It doesn't matter what is actually true. What matters is that others believe the power of the impression you create. Colin and I found ourselves in a difficult position in front of both families because we spent the night together. When we met with them, the question was not what happened, but when we would legalize our relationship. How the parents felt could best be understood when her mother said, "I hope you don't get pregnant before the wedding." I know that sounds a little extreme, but it's not. It's just that in our part of the world, principles, morals, and standards still mattered. However, according to what the media was promoting and explaining, this was no longer the norm. Slander, lie, deceive, or hide the truth, this is what was promoted and accepted. 2 weeks passed, and neither family's attitude had improved when I told Colleen, "Bloody hell, I'm fed up with their bullshit. Let's really piss them off." "What do you mean?" Colleen asked Friday night. "We'll buy a truck," I said, "because we'll need it by the end of the weekend. On Saturday, we will buy towels, linen, and everything else to make the house cozy," I said. "If we are accused of living in sin, we may as well actually be living in sin." "Are you serious?" Colleen said with a smile. "Before we do this, I want my wedding ring. A romantic dinner maybe later." So we picked out the ring set she wanted, and I put it on her finger. Then we went out and bought a truck with a bed cap. We picked him up on Saturday. I met her at Walmart. I took the first 2 carts of dishes, glasses, plates, towels, and kitchen supplies through the register and loaded them up. Then he returned and took 2 more carts baths and bedding. By the time we finished, I had gone through the checkout counter 4 times. We then went to Country Mart to buy mostly meat and a lot of stuff that the local Walmart didn't have. After unloading and putting things away, Colleen called Katie and found out that her parents were not at home. We took both cars to collect our personal belongings. I returned before her. We couldn't help but laugh as we watched 2 cars pull up to the gate on Sunday lunchtime on the security screen. Colin said, "We could pretend we're not at home. After they treated us so badly, they deserve it." Both families saw our house for the first time together. 2 factors struck them: the size of the house and how we furnished it. More importantly, both families came to apologize for their behavior. When Katie said, "Can I move in with you?" we started to relax. I then advised that I would be in court next Thursday for a divorce hearing with the judge, Donald McDonald. Her parents felt like complete idiots when Colin showed them her engagement ring. Linda looked old and tired as we stood before the judge, Donald McDonald, who asked both of us if we agreed to the terms of the divorce. Her personal life was in shambles. Simon was arrested and things were going badly. After the divorce was finalized, she asked to talk. So we walked out of the courthouse and talked as I walked to my new truck. "What do you want, Linda?" I asked coldly. "Simon took a plea deal," she said. "I didn't know what he was doing behind my back. He received 10 years, with the possibility of parole in 7. "I don't care now, Linda," I said. "I'm still focused on rebuilding my life." "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," she added. "Every time I came to you, I saw myself trapped without a future. Now I admit that I was wrong. I am selling my house and accepting a transfer to another state. If there is anything you need, call me and I can set up an appointment for you to pick it up." I didn't say anything and got into the truck. The look on her face said it all. I was still thinking about how to take revenge on her. Little did I know that Simon's acquaintances would take care of it. On Saturday morning, when the police arrived, Colleen let them in. This was the same detective who met with my father and me. He came to tell me that I am now a widower. Linda was killed by someone in Simon's circle as a result of his testimony against them. 5 years have passed since the accident occurred. 3 years since Colin and I said our vows. Peter went to see Simon for the first time and said that he had changed his orientation. His right arm was broken because he refused to give in to his cellmate's demands. He soon realized that it was easier to submit than to fight. Every year at Christmas, I receive a card wishing me a better year for the next year from my brother Richard. Our daughter, the joy of our life, is at the stage where she is just starting to crawl. She is the favorite child of all her grandparents. I have a life annuity because a specialist has declared me 20% disabled. Only my wife and mother know my real condition. For my parents' last anniversary, Colin and I gave them an envelope. We paid off their mortgage on their house and workshop. Our daughter Carrie Ann will test us as she grows up. She's a real redhead, like her mother and grandmother. We're having both families over for dinner on Sunday because we're about to announce another sibling is on the way. Colin and I are really playing the long game. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.